Princess Bride, S. Morgenstern's classic tale of true love and high adventure. The Good Parts version, abridged by William Goldman. Part 6, Section 1, The Festivities. When Indigo regained consciousness, it was still night on the cliffs of insanity. Far below, the waters of Florin Channel pounded. Indigo stirred, blinked, tried to rub his eyes, couldn't. His arms were still tied together around a tree. Indigo blinked again, vanishing cobwebs. He had gone on his knees to the man in black, ready for death. Clearly, the victor had other notions. Indigo looked around as best he could, and there it was, the six-fingered sword, glittering in the moonlight like lost magic. Indigo stretched his right leg as far as it would go and managed to touch the handle. Then it was simply a matter of inching the weapon close enough to be graspable by one hand, and then it was an even simpler task to slash his bindings. He was dizzy when he stood, and he rubbed his head behind his ear where the man in black had struck him. A lump, sizable to be sure, but not a major problem. The major problem was what to do now. Mazzini had strict instructions for occasions such as this. When a plan went wrong, go back to the beginning. Back to the beginning and wait for Mazzini. Then regroup, replan, start again. Inigo had even made a little rhyme out of it for Fezzik, so the giant would not have problems remembering what to do in time of trouble. Fool, fool, back to the beginning is the rule. Indigo knew precisely where the beginning was. They had gotten the job in Florin City itself, the thieves' quarter. Mazzini had made the arrangements alone, as he always did. He had met with their employer, had accepted the job, had planned it, all in the thieves' quarter. So the thieves' quarter was clearly the place to go. Only Inigo hated it there. Everybody was so dangerous, big, mean, and muscular. And so what if he was the greatest fencer in the world? Who'd know it to look at him? He looked like a skinny Spanish guy. It might be fun to rob. You couldn't walk around with the sign saying, "Be careful, this is the greatest fencer since the death of the Wizard of Corsica. Do not burgle." Besides, and here Inigo felt deep pain. He wasn't that great a fencer, not anymore. He couldn't be. Hadn't he just been beaten? Once, true, he had been a titan. But now, the thieves' quarter was worse than he remembered. Always before, Fezzik had been with him, and they made rhymes, and Fezzik was enough to keep any thief away. Inigo moved panicked up the dark streets, desperately afraid. Why this giant fear? What was he afraid of? He sat on a filthy stoop and pondered. Around him there were cries in the night, and from the alehouses, vulgar laughter. He was afraid, he realized then, because as he sat there, gripping the six-fingered sword for confidence, he was suddenly back to what he had been before Mazzini had found him. A failure. A man without point, with no attachment to tomorrow. Indigo had not touched brandy in years. Now he felt his fingers fumbling for money. Now he heard his footsteps running toward the nearest alehouse. Now he saw his money on the counter. Now he felt the brandy bottle in his hands. Back to the stoop he ran. He opened the bottle. He smelled the rough brandy. He took a sip. He coughed. He took a swallow. He coughed again. He gulped it down and coughed and gulped some more and half began to smile. His fears were starting to leave him. After all, why should he have ever been afraid? He was Inigo Montoya, the bottle is half gone now, son of the great Domingo Montoya, so what was there in the world worth fearing? Now all the brandy was gone. How dare fear approach a wizard such as Inigo Montoya? Well, never again. Into the second bottle. Never, never, never again. He sat alone and confident and strong. His life was straight and fine. He had money enough for brandy, and if you had that, you had the world. The stoop was wretched and bleak. Inigo slumped there, quite contented, clutching the bottle in his once trembling hands. Existence was really very simple when you did what you were told, and nothing could be simple or better than what he had in store. All he had to do was wait and drink until Vizzini came. Fezzik had no idea how long he was unconscious. He only knew as he staggered to his feet on the mountain path that his throat was very sore where the man in black had strangled him. What to do? The plans had all gone wrong. Fezzik closed his eyes, trying to think. There was a proper place to go when plans went wrong, but he couldn't quite remember. Inigo had even made a rhyme up for him so he wouldn't forget. And now, even with that, he was so stupid he had forgotten. What was it? Was it stupid, go and wait for Vizzini with Cupid? That rhymed. But where was the Cupid? Dummy, dummy, go out now and fill your tummy. That rhymed too. But what kind of instructions were those? What to do, what to do? Dunce, dunce, use your brains and do it right for once. No help. Nothing was any help. He never had done anything right, not in his whole life, until Vizzini came. And without another thought, Fezzik ran off into the night after the Sicilian. Vizzini was napping when he got there. He had been drinking wine and dozed off. Fezzik dropped to his knees and put his hands in prayer position. Vizzini, I'm sorry, he began. Vizzini napped on. Fezzik shook him gently. Vizzini did not wake. Not so gently this time. Nothing. Oh, I see. You are dead, Fezzik said. He stood up. He's dead. Vizzini is, he said softly. And then with not a bit of help from his brain, a great scream of panic burst from his throat into the night. Inigo! And he whirled back down the mountain path, because if Inigo was alive, it would be all right. It wouldn't be the same, no, it could never be that without Vizzini to order them and insult them as only he could. At least there would be time for poetry, and when Fezzik reached the cliffs of insanity, he said, Inigo, Inigo, here I am, to the rocks, and I'm here, Inigo, it's your Fezzik, to the trees, and Inigo, Inigo, answer me, please, all over until there was no conclusion to draw, but that just as there was now no Vizzini, so there was also no Inigo, and that was hard. It was, in point of fact, too hard for Fezzik. So he began to run, crying out, Be with you in a minute, Inigo, and right behind you, Inigo, and hey, Inigo, wait up, straight up, wait up, straight up, which was the way he ran, and wouldn't be there for fun with rhymes once he and Inigo were together again. But after an hour or so of shouting, his throat gave out because he had, after all, been strangled almost to death in the very recent past. On he ran, on and on and on, until finally he reached a tiny village and found, just outside town, some nice rocks that formed kind of a cave, almost big enough for him to stretch out in. He sat with his back against a rock and his hands around his knees, and his throat hurting until the village boys found him. They held their breath and crept as close as they dared. Fezzik hoped they would go away, so he froze, pretending to be off with Inigo, and Inigo would say, Barrel, and Fezzik right quick would come back, Carol, and maybe they would sing a little something until Inigo said, Serenade, and you couldn't stump Fezzik with one that easy because of centigrade. And then Inigo would make a word about the weather, and Fezzik would rhyme it, and that was how it went until the village boys stopped being afraid of him. Fezzik could tell that because they were creeping very close to him now, and all of a sudden yelling their lungs out and making crazy faces. He didn't really blame them. He looked like the kind of person you did that to, mocked. His clothes were torn and his throat was gone and his eyes were wild, and he probably would have yelled too if he'd been their age. It was only when they found him funny that he found it. It was only when they found him funny that he found it, though he did not know the word degrading. No more yelling, just laughter now. Laughter, Fezzik thought. And then he thought, giraffeter. Because that's all he was to them, some huge funny thing that couldn't make much noise. Laughter, giraffeter, from now to hereafter. Fezzik huddled up in his cave and tried looking on the bright side. At least they weren't throwing things at him. Not yet, anyway. Wesley awoke, chained in a giant cage. His shoulder was beginning to fester from the gnawing and digging that the ROUSs had done into his flesh. He ignored his discomfort momentarily to try and adjust to his surroundings. He was certainly underground. It was not the lack of windows that made that sure, more the darkness. From somewhere above him now, he could hear animal sounds, on an occasional lion roar, the yelp of the cheetah. Shortly after his return to consciousness, the albino appeared, bloodless, with skin as pale as dying birch. The candlelight that served to illuminate the cage made the albino seem totally like a creature who had never seen the sun. The albino held a tray which carried many things: bandages and food, healing powders, and brandy. Where are we? From Wesley. A shrug from the albino. Who are you? Shrug. That was almost the entire extent of the fellow's conversation. Wesley asked question after question while the albino tended and redressed his wound, then fed him food that was warm and surprisingly good and plentiful. Shrug. Shrug. Who knows I'm here? Shrug. Lie, but tell me something. Give me an answer. Who knows I'm here? Whispered. I know. They know. They? Shrug. The prince and the count, you mean? Nod. And that is all? Nod. When I was brought in, I was half conscious. The count was giving the orders, but 3 soldiers were carrying me. They know too. Shake. Whispered. Knew. They're dead? That's what you're saying? Shrug. Am I to die then? Shrug. Wesley lay back on the floor of the giant underground cage, watching as the albino silently reloaded the tray, glided from sight. If the soldiers were dead, surely it was not unreasonable to assume that he would eventually follow. But if they wanted his erasure, surely it was also not unreasonable to assume that they had not the least intention of doing it immediately. Else why tend his wounds? Why return his strength with good warm food? No, his death would be a while yet. But in the meantime, considering the personalities of his captors, it was finally not unreasonable to assume that they would do their best to make him suffer greatly. Wesley closed his eyes. There was pain coming, and he had to be ready for it. He had to prepare his brain. He had to get his mind controlled and safe from their efforts so that they could not break him. He would not let them break him. He would hold together against anything at all. If only they gave him sufficient time to make ready, he knew he could defeat pain. It turned out they gave him sufficient time. It was months before the machine was ready, but they broke him anyway.